What's up, vinyl community? Welcome back to the latest Zoom session. Well, today we're welcoming Dave Belson. What's up, Dave?
Yo.
For those of you that have been part of the vinyl community on YouTube for a while, it may be a familiar face. Dave used to make videos on YouTube. Originally, I think under On the Turntable was your name. Now you've kind of transitioned over to Record Bug, which is an old name I think you used to use. So I'm sure a lot of people will be happy to see your face, familiar face, and I know a lot of people still follow you on Instagram, and you're still, I think, active sometimes on some of the Facebook groups. But yeah, it's great to have you. Dave and I we connect pretty regularly about talking about records, but I figured it would be great to get him on here to share for everyone else to kind of see what he's been up to and to hear a bit about his past. So you want to tell us quickly about just Record Bug, which is kind of where most people follow you right now and see what you've been listening to on Instagram is Record Bug. Where does that name kind of come from? How long you've been using it for?
Record Bug is or was my eBay name. I came up with it in 1997, something like that. And so I just carried it over to, social media. So there isn't really a deep story behind it.
I mean, we all, it's very kind of self-explanatory in the sense that all of us, if you're watching this, it's because you've got that bug. I guess that's where you kind of that name.
Yeah. I mean, I was, when you're looking for names on things, I was trying to come up with something that didn't have numbers in it at the time.
Yeah.
So.
Oh yeah, sure. The number underscore number.
Yes.
Cool. So let's get into it. Been kind of following a similar format for these Zoom sessions that I've been doing, kind of going through your history. So usually I start with your first memories of like getting into music in general, and then kind of your memories of like when you started taking on your own musical journey by actively seeking out music yourself.
Yeah, sure. I guess I've always been into music. Listening to my clock radio at night when I was supposed to be asleep, like underneath the blankets, so it's always been a presence in my life. When I first actively started finding music was like my dad would take me to yard sales, and, I could go through the record boxes and, I could spend $1 on 4 records or something like that and bring them home. So that was like, I guess, the beginning of me finding my own stuff instead of the radio deciding what I listened to. So, but then I really started collecting. I moved out of my house when I was 17, and cheap thrills were, having like $30 and going and getting a knapsack full of records and bringing them home. So, but records have always been a part of my life, at least as far back as I can remember.
That was the first format for you. And was there a specific genre that like jumped out at you at first that you're interested in, or you kind of had diverse tastes from the get-go?
That's a really good question, actually. I guess I've always had diverse tastes. Like one of the things I remember listening to on my clock radio was a show called Dr. Demento, and he basically played like novelty records. And I remember just being so jazzed by that because it was like so different than the stuff you would hear on commercial radio. And so I guess I've always sort of leaned in that direction. That was the first place I heard Zappa, and I was young. I was like 7 or 8, 9, somewhere in that window. So,
and then take us through some of your, like, maybe throughout the years where your like focuses have gone. Like we said, you do have diverse tastes, but you do have some pretty deep knowledge in different genres. So maybe you can take us through a little timeline of when you were kind of into what as you go through.
Yeah, sure. Where do I start with that? Well, I mean, I guess when I first started, like when I first started collecting, is that too loud? Okay. When I first started collecting, I was sort of buying whatever was cheap. So if they were like $3-4 records, I would just buy them, and I bought anything that looked different and weird. So it was like prog rock and reggae and African records and electronic stuff, and it was just sort of whatever grabbed me in the moment. It was pretty unfocused. It was just me wanting to drink as much in as I could
And
I was just starting to go to record stores and stuff.
where does it, you think that comes from? Because that's pretty rare that someone starts off with such a like wide scope, right? It usually starts with one genre and then that jumps to another. But like, how old were you at that point when you were already open to all those different, whatever kind of came your way that was interesting?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I've always been sort of interested in lots of different types of music, but that sort of collecting the different types of music, I guess, just came out of being kind of broke and not being able to afford like the records like in the top bins at the record store. I had to like go underneath and dig through like all the cheaper stuff, and so I discovered a lot of things. Yeah, it wasn't like I was actively seeking out weird stuff. It was just more, that's what I want. I'd rather bring home a bag full of, you know, records from down below than to bring home like a Grateful Dead and a Led Zeppelin record. So I guess that's where that came from.
Gotcha. And what years were these where you were like starting to do this, just to get give the idea, people an idea?
Would have been late 80s. And then towards 90, like 89, 90, I got a job in a coffee shop and met sort of a musical mentor, and he turned me on to like free jazz and Rastafarian music and crazy African stuff. And he was from New Orleans, and so he turned me on to a lot of the musics from down there and stuff. And he really, instead of me being sort of just like a Tasmanian devil of bringing it all in, he would be like, "Yo, you should check that out, and you should check that out." And so that was also another kind of defining moment in my musical upbringing. And then I started doing college radio, and then I started collecting not just for me, but for me to play for other people, and that changed.
Different, yeah.
That changed things a lot, actually. Yeah.
And just to give the people an idea, because I find the city you're in defines kind of a lot of what you might be finding. So when you were first jumping into record stores and yard sales, where were you in the States?
Greater Boston area.
You were in Greater Boston. But then the coffee shop, was that still in Boston, or that was?
Yep, that was in Boston. I didn't leave Boston until late 91, 92, something like that. I went down to Florida for a year, and then I went to California after that, and then I came back.
And did you notice a big difference, like from what you were seeing in the stores in Boston in those years to when you went out to California?
Well, I thought you were going to say Florida.
Florida,
there's a huge difference between here and Florida, obviously. You know, like I didn't realize it at the time, but I'm pretty spoiled just with the amount, and you have the same thing in Montreal, just the amount of jazz that's around, and soul music and just stuff like that. You know, you go to other parts of the country and there's big holes as far as that's concerned. Also, reggae was another one. I thought you would be able to find reggae everywhere. Because again, I would go up to Montreal when I was a kid and I could find jazz and reggae. So I was just like, oh, you must be able to find it everywhere. But you really can't. It's much harder in other parts of the country. So,
which is what's fun about jumping around, like, and digging in other cities, is you're going to find different stuff that you don't find in your own city based on the regional history of who was living there and what people were listening to.
Yeah, you know, it's actually how I approach stores in general. I go in and I look to see what their bag is, you know, like what they're focused on, and I just start there. You just kind of adapt. Like, it doesn't make sense for you to walk into a shop that, you know, is like specializes in rock and like try to find the electronic music section. You know what I mean?
Although if someone's going in there because it's known as a rock shop, you might find some gems in other sections because people are not hitting them as much.
Yes, but usually I've found that the deeper stuff tends to be in what the shop is focused on. Yeah. No, I mean, you can definitely find the holes, you know, and dig deep there, but more often than not, you're going to find the gems in what the store is focused on. So I guess you could apply that to a city as well, you know.
Yeah, for sure. So take us back then. Now you're doing college radio, and where do you go from there?
Yeah.
Obviously, that changes what you're buying because you're playing it out for people instead of just yourself.
Yeah, and also when I started doing college radio, I was friends with this other guy who had a reggae show at Brandeis, and I started doing my show at Boston College. And he sort of, I guess, introduced me to the greater Boston reggae scene. So I got really heavy into that. Yeah, just going to see that pretty much once or twice a week.
Yeah.
At the clubs around here, it was prolific back then. So I got super deep into reggae, but then I was also doing radio, and I was doing an overnight show, and it was free form, and I could really do whatever I wanted, which was fantastic. Like it was really a great way to get into radio. So yeah.
The most people, in our circle of record collectors, not everyone, but myself and a lot of people I know kind of like got into the vinyl game later on in life, because when we were coming up was, vinyl wasn't really part of our upbringing. But someone like you, who you never stopped buying records from when you were young until now. So like how did that look for you? Your tastes were already diverse. You're amassing records, you're doing college radio. I'm sure you're getting records, from a lot of records, because you're doing that. And then where does it go from there, from the mid 90s? You can't just keep buying records nonstop.
I mean, I couldn't when I went to like a new record store in the 90s, I couldn't really afford. I mean, I probably could have bought one or two of the new records, but I mean, I mostly hit the bargain bins. And yeah, I mean, I sort of evolved with the times. When CDs were really big, I would go to Tower Records and it would be mostly CDs, but then there was like this whole section in this alcove that was all import records, and they were cheap. They were like $7, $8, $9 because they weren't selling, and I was buying like African records and weird avant-garde classical records and just kind of stuff like that. I just sort of adapted, I guess. I mean, I did buy CDs, but it was mostly because it would only come out on CD.
Yeah.
But
and then so how is your, like, let's call it, like, there's your musical taste, which you're so open and always evolving, but how is your collection, like, kind of the structure of it evolved? Like, I know you're someone, as you tell me, it's like an open rotating door, there's stuff coming in and out. So how has that changed over the years, what you hold on to and what you let go?
Well, I mean, for starters, I didn't used to let anything go. Like I have a huge collection because I didn't want to let anything go, because I did radio, I think, for 13 years, not solid, but about 13 years. So I didn't want to let things go, because I was always like, oh, that weird Kid record, and oh, that weird Dinosaur Sounds record, like all these things. I was like, could always picture a way to incorporate it into a show or whatever. But after I stopped doing radio, I really started to reevaluate just the need to have such a massive amount of records. And since that, that was somewhere around when my first kid was born, so he's 17. So somewhere around there, I just started weeding things out. And what I say to you is, like, I like the collection to kind of breathe, and it's just sort of done that. But they're like staples. But even those staples, get thin sometimes and then fill back up again. And
yeah, it's always something I admire, that ability to, like, let go of a record you love to make room for something else to come in. And
well, it's compelling when you're in a store and you see something on the wall and you're like, oh, like $125, and you're like, I could make that happen with 3 records from home, so that's kind of was another motivation for me.
Yeah. Cool. You want to take us through a bit of, like, some of I'm seeing all these records behind you, these shelves on the ground. I know I'm
embarrassed. I'm embarrassed at the state of the space here.
Show the people.
I mean, are you trying to, like, get a gauge as to, like, what my collection is? Is that what you're?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always fun. What I've done is to do some blind polls without you choosing, is kind of like, just like, if you have some sections, you can let us know, like, hey, this is what this is, and just give us a little glimpse into what's in there. If there's some records you pull out you want to talk about a bit more, that's cool too.
Yeah, I don't know if I'll, like, pull stuff from the shelves, just because, I don't know, I have so much stuff laying around, so maybe I'll, like, pick some things up off the floor, because it's just easier to reach. But so I have, like, like three things of jazz. I don't know what you can see there, but I have three things of jazz. One's like standard, and then the other two are sort of more, you know, it's like the spiritual and avant-garde stuff. Then I have a whole crate of reggae, and then that looks like world music and kids records, soul and R&B and funk soundtracks. I got maybe two things of rock back there, and then a whole thing of like hip hop.
Cool.
Those are just like records. They're not the 12 inches. I have like so many. That was one of the things I didn't get rid of. I have all these hip hop 12 inches upstairs, maybe 6 boxes, something like that.
Was that from radio? Got a lot of those?
Yeah. No, I was playing out too. So, and I've always loved hip hop ever since I was like a kid. Yeah, it's just one of those genres that I really connected with. Like progressive and psychedelic rock and miscellaneous stuff. And then over here, I don't know if you can see these, but like I had the high school build me some like record store style bins. And so I have like a whole thing of electronic and avant-garde music, private presses and that kind of stuff, and then world music, and then sort of miscellaneous. And then there's just sort of like, I don't know what you call it, maybe like pre-sale things down on the floor and underneath, and like your fat stack. You have like your own shelf, man.
Pre-sale meaning stuff that you're gonna sell eventually, that you're cleaning up and stuff like that. Cool.
Yeah, so like I went out on a buy today, and you know, like stuff goes. So the truck is like my first sorting area, and then it goes downstairs. That's my second sorting area. So the stuff that comes up here is stuff that's going to get sold, and it goes in there. And as it comes up towards the front, I clean it and price it. So that's kind of the flow for records.
And I know that, I mean, some people know this as well, that you usually are doing shows, you know, and throughout the spring, and you're always hitting up shows. So obviously with the current situation, that has changed quite a bit, since there aren't any shows going on. And so now you're still trying to pick up records. I know you were saying it was a bit harder, but now it seems like people are easing up a bit and you're getting some calls to buy some stuff.
Yep. And you know, I have like a system now. Today was like my 6th or 7th buy, and so now I have a little system to make the customers and myself feel more comfortable with everything that's going on. And so it's just new world, man. It's just you gotta kind of adapt a little bit. But yeah, people are starting to, you know, let me into their garage or their basement to buy records again, and it's great. I mean, it's just nice to be out and digging again. But it's also nice because these are records that will hopefully like get back into circulation. So
what I love about your setup there is that it's like, it really shows how diverse you have, like small amounts of so many different genres, like not small, but like medium amounts of so many different genres. So it's really like curated as to what you like and you want to keep, versus like a massive amount of just like one style, you know?
Yeah, and it reflects my crates when I'm selling. There's not a lot of like, you know, under $20 records there. I mean, I have like, you know, bargain bins or whatever, but it tends to be more like boutique-y style, you know, where it's like $20 and up, and you don't have to dig through it a lot to find some things that you're interested in. And so my collection is the same. There's a lot of like, I've weeded out so much stuff, so now tends to be the stuff that I just either want to keep around, or, you know, again, I've told you too, everything has a price. So I picked this up. I don't know if you can.
Synchro System Movement.
Yeah, it's King Sunny Ade. It's probably one of my favorite records. I mean, you can see, I don't know if you can see, it says volume 12 there or whatever. So there's a ton of these, but this one in particular is just so, it's so good. It's such a great record. So I had to share that because like, and every time I see this, I pick it up because it's just so good, and I know that I'll hook somebody up with it.
That would be something that you've seen multiple times. Like, I know I've seen his records around, but it's not something I see often, and that looks a little different than the ones I see probably.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's like an African pressing. So it's not, you know, I've seen like a lot of his 80s stuff on Shanachie. And I think Shanachie, and there's another Afro Beat or something like that, which is another sub label of Shanachie. Then I was just listening to this the other day.
I remember.
And I still think it's a jazz record. I mean, it's got Richard Davis and Warren Smith on it. And that's, I think it's not a secret, but it's definitely, I don't think people talk about it or whatever. But if you could pluck his vocals out of this, I think jazz heads would really appreciate this record. Plus, it just sounds good, this Japanese pressing.
I mean, that's one of the artists that I grew up listening to with my dad, Van Morrison. That was just, I mean, we listen to a lot of different styles of music at home, but that was, I think, one that I remember vividly from a kid. Being a kid, my dad, I think he had some tapes, and then we had like a greatest hit CD we'd play out in the car all the time when driving. So very familiar.
Greatest hits are, he's perfect for greatest hits, yeah. I think, because some of his albums are inconsistent, but greatest hits would be a way to. And I was just listening to this the other day too.
Tell us a bit about that record. What year is that? It's from Jamaica, I'm assuming, but
this one is. It doesn't say the year. I'm gonna guess 77, 76, 77. It's actually it's Ross Michael, from Ross Michael and the Sons of Negus. And this would be like the Jamaican equivalent of a spiritual jazz record. It's I call it Rasta business, heavy percussion. This one is like drenched in reverb, and it gives it almost like a dreamlike quality. It's a fantastic record. It's been reissued recently, and you can pick it up and it's a beautiful pressing, and you can get it for like $20 or $15 or whatever. I highly recommend that record too.
Is that a term that you coined, Rasta business?
No, it's just something I've been saying for a while. Like when something is like, you know, like you see something going on or you're hearing something and you're just like, oh, that's serious Rasta business going on there. You know, like, I don't know. I saw another example that would be, I saw Burning Spear somewhere in the 89, 90, 88, somewhere in that window there in a really small club in Boston that doesn't exist anymore. And he took off his, thing and shook his dreads out, and he like slowed the band way down. So it was almost like this, almost like a walking beat. And then he just like stood there and like looked down and like looked around and like looked up, and then he put his hand up and just started like singing. And it like, when all the hair on your arms goes up, I was like, whoa. And he did that for like, it felt like forever. It was probably 5 or 6 minutes, and then things started to pick back up, and they went into another song or whatever. But like, that'd be another example of like, Rasta business. He's just, pulling stuff down from up here and shooting it out there towards everybody. There you go.
It's powerful stuff when you remember a specific moment from a concert that was 30 years ago. There's moments that just are striking and touch you.
Yeah, man.
You want to pull out a few more records? I know that people it's fun to see just anything, even blind or selected.
It's more fun to like just grab random stuff.
Exactly. Give the people an idea of what you got.
Here, look, I didn't spend much time because I'd rather it be like weird and random. So this is Esquivel, Juan Garcia Esquivel. He was a Mexican artist who had some fame here in the States. I mean, aside from just like the beautiful cheesecake cover, his claim to fame was, and this is going to be funny because you know how I feel about certain jazz records, but his claim to fame was like these massively wide spreads in the stereo, and sometimes they would travel, like literally they would be turning the knob, so like the horns would be like wah, wah. But this is a particularly delicious record of his.
completely unknown to me. Not
Maybe
surprising.
not this one. This is Commander Ebenezer Obey. I can't tell if there's glare or not, but this is another African record from Nigeria. Just a solid highlights record, you know? And you can kind of tell just when you look at the labels and stuff and the jackets, like just how sexy kind of the record is going to be. But you know, that's like a $10 record, but it's like got $20, $30, $40 value as far as the music goes. And here's another one. This is I don't know.
The turntable.
You got to let me know, yeah, if you can't see it or not.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
All right, so and that's on Trojan, and basically it's this is Big Youth, Dennis Brown, Delroy Wilson, and someone named Alexander Porcius that I'm not familiar with that last person, but it's essentially like a live event, and each one does like a couple of tracks. You know, they probably recorded the whole thing and then just put a couple of tracks each on here. But it's almost like kind of in that DJ style. You know, there's like probably the band, and then each of the artists would get up and play with that band. So it almost has that kind of club DJ feel to it. But it's a really interesting record, and I'd never seen it before.
That was released in the 70s or in the 80s?
This one, I'm going to say 70s. This will say on the label, I'm pretty sure. 75.
Was that something that was common that they would do like events like that? They just weren't always made into records, or?
Yeah, it's super common. Live music in Jamaica, I mean, I think it's still popular, but it wasn't as popular as it was in like the kind of 50s all the way through the 70s and into the early 80s.
But I mean, with one band and then different artists kind of coming up and going through.
Oh yeah. That was, yeah. I mean, unless it was like a big, huge event like Sunsplash, you know, where they would reset the stage between each artist, you know, like, but that was, you know, Sunsplash was a massive, massive event. I don't know if you've ever heard of that or whatever.
No.
But they would go on tour around the globe and stuff. But you got to see some pretty sick artists, like big, big artists. I maybe went 4 or 5 times when it came through the Boston area. You know, I got to see Steel Pulse and Burning Spear and Eka Mouse, and I mean, the list goes on and on and on. But yeah, so if you were doing like a smaller club, yeah, it'd be easier than resetting the stage with the, you know, you just have the house band, right? And then the artists would get up and do their thing. And that sort of transferred into DJ culture, you know, but it would just be turntables. And then you know, the MC, there'd be an MC and then a DJ who would usually talk over other people's records.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Cool.
Yeah, man.
Knowing that, would you be willing to pull 1 or 2 jazz records, knowing that a lot of people watching this are jazz heads?
Yeah, I mean, okay. No pressure or anything.
It doesn't have to.
I don't know what to. No, I know. I'm just.
Well, close your eyes and pull.
I'm just flipping real fast because I know nobody wants to.
I'll just take this moment to say, for those of you that don't follow Dave, go follow him at RecordBug on Instagram, and he's always posting kind of like a wide range of records that he's currently listening to. And when he does have stuff for sale, sometimes you sell online, not just at shows. Sometimes you kind of let people know through Instagram when you have stuff for sale. So for people that don't know you already, check out at RecordBug on Instagram.
And I'll probably be selling more stuff online coming up soon because of the lack of shows. And people gotta let things breathe. On Friedman Trio, just kind of a really great, I guess I would call it a modal jazz record.
Is that on Riverside? I can't see.
Yeah, it's on Riverside. I mean, this is one where I kind of would love to hear a mono of it just to.
What's the title?
To check it out. A Day in the City, 6 jazz variations on a theme.
Cool.
So, yeah, the other 2 players on there I'm not familiar with either, but you know, this is one where I grabbed it because of the jacket and was just super pleasantly surprised.
I'm not too familiar with his music at all, but I remember when you were in Montreal and we were at the Au Comptoir, you pointed one of his records out there.
Yeah, that was like that was just right next to it. Yeah, I'm forgetting what that one's. Yeah, you really can't go wrong especially if you like jazz, that sort of jazz kind of classical crossover, that third stream type of stuff. But he tends to be a little more jazz oriented with classical influences than the other way around or whatever. This is Good Golly Miss Nancy. This is Cleve Posar record. Everybody would be, I don't know if you can see up in the top corner there, but it says Robert Posar. He did a record called Solo Percussion, I think.
I have no idea what that is you're showing me. I see it's on Savoy, so I'm assuming it's from the 50s, but...
No, it's definitely not from the 50s.
60s?
Oh, now I can't find it. He's got a record. Oh, here it is. Yeah, Solo Percussion. So this...
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, that I've seen.
Yep, so that's Cleve Posar. I would call him a percussionist.
Yeah.
And he spent time around, I think actually that Solo Percussion record was recorded in and around New England and maybe a little in New York. So this is another one of his records, basically, though you wouldn't know by looking at it. And the only thing you can tell by it is the name Posar at the top and the back there.
It looks totally...
But this is just a really great, avant-garde jazz record. I mean, and just look at his head opening up with another head inside of it.
And then what year was that from? I didn't know. Like when I think Savoy, I just think like late 50s kind of.
Yeah, but this is on that weird, they did that sort of, I forget what they called it. There was they did like a little grip of records that were all kind of like, this is 67.
Okay.
Or at least the notes say 67. So, but they did like a little grip of records that were all kind of odd, like not typical Savoy jazz records. And I think if you look it up on Discogs, it might have like a sub, they have the sub label kind of. Yeah, I think there's a sub label and there's other really crazy records that are part of that thing, which I would love to get. And then I grabbed this Butch Morris record. Yeah, so I mean, this one, this is a really special record for me in my collection just because it's on this label Karma. And I became friendly with the guy who owned the label 7 years ago. I don't know, something like that. He was older then and living in Florida. And I used to buy dead stock records from him and sell them to VC members. And, at some point he passed away and, I don't collect things just to collect things, but I wanted to have every single one of the records on his label. So, but that's a fantastic, another sort of avant-garde improvised jazz record.
What's the story behind that label?
He was living in New York City and he was friendly with a lot of the loft jazz musicians, and he just started recording them. Yeah, I mean, I wish it's the kind of thing where if I would to talk deeper about it, I would need to reference some of the emails that he sent me, because I would ask him some deep questions and he would give me deep answers, like talk about recording sessions and stuff. Like he was telling me once, like there are all these musicians around and like Butch Morris was just kind of like turning them on and off while he was recording, and that was creating the record and stuff, and just really crazy stuff like that. And he recorded one of the records at Rashid's place. I think that's what it was called. It was a club, but the sound system there was atrocious. And so the record sounds kind of crappy because it was meant to play in the club, but it was never meant to have like a line going into a tape machine. You know what I mean? So just interesting things like that. But he was just a really kind of a cool guy. He used to distribute records in New York. So, I think at his height, he maybe had 60,000 records. I don't know, something like that. So
what was his name?
Remember? Damn it. Yeah, I'm spacing.
Cool.
Yeah, I haven't talked to him in 3 or 4 years because he passed away. So, but anyway.
Perfect. Well, that's pretty much it. That gives us a good idea. It's a little different. I love to see everyone's different kind of journey through music, and and buying records, letting go of records, stuff like that. So I know the people on YouTube that know you will be happy to see you. People miss you. People, I don't know if people tell that to you, if people write to you, oh, you should make videos, but I definitely hear that, here and there throughout the years. I know people miss seeing your face, so they'll be happy to see you. And
right on. Well, comment below
exactly.
and prod me into making more videos, and I'll do it. Yeah.
If you enjoy this, comment below. Dave will respond. Give the people what they want. Cool. Thanks a lot. I really appreciate that you took the time and that we were able to get this done.
Oh, right on. I mean, we've been meaning to do it for a bit, so it's nice to make it happen. So
exactly. Cool.
Right on.
Take care. Peace.
Okay.